Our expert panelists. Dr. Richard Palmquist is an integrative vet and owner of Centinela Animal Hospital. He's an author, lecturer, and teacher. Dr. Christina Chambreau, internationally known homeopathic veterinarian, lecturer, and author. Joan Ranquet, animal communicator, teacher, author, lecturer, and owner of Communication with All Life University. Brendan Golia, professional pet trainer, behavior expert, and owner of OC Canine Coaching.
Welcome to All Paws Pet Talk TV. I'm your host, Kat Michio, and this is Lulu Llama. Lulu, want to do high five? High five? Good girl. Thank you for joining us today. We have a special guest joining our panel of experts. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, as you might just learn something new today to help that special animal companion of yours. So let's get this show started. In this special episode, we are excited to be joined by Dr. Jeff Feinman. Dr. Feinman is an integrative veterinarian and founder of the Holistic Actions. While he is an expert in many arenas, today we are going to talk about a passion of his, improving quality of life for pets and people using Beam. Welcome, Dr. Feinman. What an honor and a privilege to have you joining us today. Let's get this conversation started. I have a question, actually. I have read each of the initial in the word beam, and it has its own definition. Can you define the word or initials beam stands for?
Thank you for asking, and thank you so much. I'm very grateful to be here and to have my bandwidth good enough to be here. I'm very, very happy. Beam, behavior, energy, appetite, and mood are externally observable. So things that pet parents can see in their pets that relate directly to quality of life. So it's a way of following a pet's health journey or life journey by following their internal balance, which reflects in their quality of life and beam. So beam is the parameter that allows us to focus on the animal as an individual instead of its symptoms, diseases, or diagnoses. And it can be used in a lot of ways, and I hope we get to go into some of them.
Well, that's usually where I come in and say, so can you give us some examples of how you might have used that, like with actual case examples, if you can?
I would love it, and what a great question. Thanks, Dr. Rick. I guess the example I'd use on this panel is beam training. So training a dog or cat based on beam, and it equates most similarly to ERIT's choice-based training, what your guest, Dr. Beckhoff, was talking about, letting dogs or cats decide what they want to do when they want to do it. And especially, a specific example is the therapeutic sniff walk, which is just an outdoor walk, loose leash walk, where you let your dog or cat decide where they want to go, what they want to sniff, when they want to do, what they want to do, and it correlates with an improvement in internal physiologic features as well as their quality of life. So
that's the way the beam actually shows the quality of life, right? So and I think what's important to talk about with beam is how you can use it for trending, watching it and paying attention to it over time rather than just when an animal's ill.
Great question. One of my favorites, because the beam score is on a 1 to 10 scale, where 10 is 100%. And by following that score over time, you can tell if your animal is getting better, not changing, or actually getting worse. So even though those symptoms or specific symptoms may be improving, if their beam is getting worse, they're not getting better internally. So that ear infection may be going away, but if your animal is not greeting you at the door anymore or not eating all of its food anymore, there's something missing.
But you'd want to have this almost like a baseline sort of thing, right? You'd want to have the baseline way before, not that, we can shift or grow or evolve, but if you have an understanding and you're always observing, then you've got a way to pick up something really subtle that could be really big later on before you get to it being big.
Exactly. Beam is a very, very accurate early warning system. If you trend the beam in your journal, in Dr. Christina's journal, you will be able to pick up trends before sometimes the blood work or examinations or other diagnostics can pick up trends. It's like, how many times have we gone to the doctor and we're just off? There's something wrong, but all the diagnostics are normal. That tells us that something internally, energetically, and we'll go into that in a little more detail, but something internal is out of balance. And this whole system it's like the balance beam. We're putting the high beams on the better health of the dog or cat.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because when we're treating, sometimes in naturopathic or natural healing, the client comes for one perceived problem, like you said, an ear infection. And then we know that ear infection a lot of times is relating to something that's deeper, more interior, like the microbiome being out of balance or the gut being out of balance. And so sometimes that healing has to occur in the more important range before the external part changes. And it doesn't always change in a way that is what we consider to be better. Like sometimes better as actually that the ear discharge gets worse. But the character of the discharge changes. Like if it's really red and hot and stinky, and then the discharge becomes more voluminous, but it's more clear and light and less malodorous, that's actually a sign of improvement. So if you were doing beam, you might notice now your dog is shaking his head less, pawing at his ear less, eating better, running, playing. And that communication to the veterinarian would help them deal with that. And it's a lot like what we talk about in terms of Herring's Law in that regard.
It's intuitive to you, Rick, and most pet parents. And yes, beam and all of the framework that we teach in holistic actions is based on Herring's Law and homeopathy and the framework that Dr. Hahnemann discovered, which is really just the framework of working with the body and nature instead of working against it with anti.
Feinman, it sounds like you're making a great case for avoiding free feeding right away. Like essentially, we're not going to observe anything if we don't know what we're observing.
Right.
It seems to me, and most people, once they hear it, one of the first things I say when I work with behavior cases is, why do you free feed? They'll make the case, my dogs they free feed, they're fine. And there's a lot of reasons as far as daily observations and this happens in my family, and it's something that's happening right now, where you can immediately tell the feeling of your pet, your dog, that day. And you can quickly, within 2 days, get a real reason to see your vet versus maybe 5, 7, 14 days where you're like, now I really see something's off. But, they didn't rush. They weren't sitting there. They didn't actually finish the bowl. They kind of picked it out. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, maybe there's a tooth issue. Maybe there's a digestive issue. Maybe you're nervous. Who knows? But it's a good marker to start with real quickly.
Beautiful. Yeah, perfect. Thank you for bringing that up. Great demonstrative case for that. And that is Rain. The dog's name was Rain. And it's a dog that started not barking excitedly for a meal and not finishing everything in her bowl, whereas that was her usual golden retriever MO. And we were able to detect Lyme kidney disease early because of that, and the dog lived for years, which is kind of unheard of for Lyme kidney disease. And part of it is because we picked it up early and we worked with their body with homeopathy and other integrative methods to get her to be as good as consciousness and the universe wanted her to be for as long as she was, as long as she could be.
Wouldn't it make then like that continual, like the observation as a continuum, enable somebody to take a disease and actually make it a condition versus a disease, right? Like if you're living more with you're living with it, but it's still, they're still fine.
Exactly, and we don't even talk about disease per se, but they're challenges that we can overcome. I myself have a genetic chronic disease since 1975. My life now, thanks to Beam and this framework, is better now than it was, back 30, 40, 50 years ago.
So also Beam is important. We've sort of touched on it, but so number one, it's good, as Brendan said, as a clue if any of those symptoms are beginning to be off, but it can also help you not panic. So if you develop, so talk a little bit about developing, if there are symptoms and you might be thinking, oh, I've got to go to the vet, but they aren't seeing people. Do I want to sit for 5 hours in the emergency room? Do I really need to go? How can Beam help you decide if you actually need to go to the vet or not?
That is a great way. Beam is a way to put any individual symptom into context of the whole holistic self. So that horrible looking ear infection or some other physical symptom in a dog with a high beam is no cause to run in right away, make your next available appointment. But if your dog or cat has no symptoms at all, but the beam drops, you probably do want to go to the ER. You probably do want to go see your vet as soon as you can. But yet much more frequently, we see in holistic actions individual symptoms, and especially bad diagnoses, which are really not bad per se. They're just challenging to the individual, not to the dog. And that's a different story. It's the dog's perspective, the cat's perspective, and the pet guardian or veterinarian's perspectives are different. I mean, a great example might be the cat with a really bad diagnosis that goes to the vet and they find kidney failure and they say, well, we got to put your kitty to rest right now. But the cat's eating. The Beam score is 8 or above because that's kind of our baseline is 8, 9, or 10 is perfect. And the pet guardian may say, not today. I don't think so, because they've been following Beam.
So I have a question. How does the pet guardian, as I am, how does the pet guardian learn the steps to utilize Beam?
I think really what Dr. Feinman's trying to teach people in a way that allows the complexity to interact with the simplicity is just to say, look, you need to observe your pet. So if you're doing Beam, what you're doing is consciously intending to look at your pet and evaluate some specific criteria and then observe those in a trend from day to day. It's not like I have to now do Beam. It's like I'm going to watch my pet and record these things. It gives a objective nature to a subjective behavior, and it ties it down a little bit so that people can look at that on a daily sort of trend. Right?
It's sort of like when you're really sick and being treated and you feel miserable. And if you focus on that one day when you feel miserable, then it's not the trend. But over a week of treatment, you found that some days you were better and some days you weren't better and other days you were a little better. So the trend, you could see, oh, okay, I'm doing fine. So regardless of what's going on with the animals, and one of them is aging. We've talked about this on some of the other shows, is people think that, oh, they should be having a lower beam as they get older. They should have the behavior, energy, mood, appetite, all of that could be decreasing. So it's basically just paying attention to those 4 things and maybe giving it a number. Is it a 10? Is it a 4? Sometimes numbers are hard. So you can just simply, just write down each one and see, has there been a change, but not to focus on each day necessarily, but more of the trend. Does that make sense, Kat?
Yes. But I would add the easiest way, Kat, is go to the holisticactions.com/beam article that outlines the whole thing. If you want even more, there's a free course at Holistic Actions that walks you through the bases for beam and feeding and quality of life and this whole approach.
Definitely will do that.
It's awesome. And Dr. Jeff, how does this, you've talked and touched on energy. What about there's energy and there's spirituality, and do you want to draw some, and we talked with Dr. Beckoff a little bit about all life, not just specific animals. So you want to start on that topic a bit?
And right now in the vet paradigm and the science paradigm, we know energy only is cellular energy as produced by mitochondria. And we are beginning to correlate, mainly the human medical world is correlating consciousness, energy, and physiologic function. The happier you are, the higher your energy, the better you function. There's a whole body of awesome human research called flow research. Flow is the flow of energy in the body, or information, because energy and information travel together. And beam allows you to monitor that flow and how smooth it is. It's kind of like thinking about, the framework is based in nature. So thinking about the smoothly flowing river has a high beam, but when you put obstacles in the way, like bad diet or vaccines or drugs or other things that might be problematic for the animal, then that smoothly flowing river starts to get turbulence and the beam drops.
And they all work together, or are you looking at them individually? Would the appetite change the mood? How would viewers understand how it all works together?
That's a great question, and that's why we give it a number, so things don't get individually overweighted too much. Your appetite, all of our appetites, may be off for a day or two, but if the beam score has just gone from a 10 to a 9, then it's not quite as critical as it might be as beam score dropping even further. Then I guess to answer your question, we'd have to look at the individual symptoms broken down again in the homeopathic framework by the 4 Ps. Is the appetite drop persistent? Is it problematic? Is it prominent? Is there a big change in appetite? Is it not unusual for this dog or cat to go for a day or two and not eat well? And then, the favorite of the homeopath, the peculiar symptom. Is it a weird thing? Like, my dog has never not eaten in his entire life. Well, that might be a little more peculiar than a dog that skips meals here or there.
Normally arthritis and stiffness is worse when the weather is cold and humid. So if you have a dog or a cat whose arthritis, or person whose arthritis is worse when it's hot and dry, that's a little peculiar. So you need to be specific about watching your symptoms. And that's the joy of part of, I think, Dr. Jeff, what you're alluding to with the spirituality and the energy field is that that's a way of the people interacting with their animals to actually help them heal and to not be upset themselves about what's going on with their animals.
No, so if we're doing beam, right? If we're doing BEAM on a regular basis, in the way that we look at things, we're becoming not just passive observers, but actually active observers who are becoming a part of the manifestation or a part of the condition we're creating by our agreements. So we agree to have the dog, and we agree to take care of them, and we agree to take care of them when they're sick. So why do we wait until they don't eat for 5 days to call the vet, and then wait 2 weeks for an appointment to get a diagnosis that they have a disease which has a name but no cure? So we should be looking outside that paradigm, outside that box, and saying, what can we do to catch the dog when we can intervene, when we can actually make a decision that makes their health healthier, as opposed to making their death more distant. And I think it's so important for us to have these conversations. And some people think that's boring. It's like telling people that they need to learn about love, and they go, I already know about love. I don't need to know that, right? I need to know what pill to give my dog. But if you love your dog better, and the people love your dog, they'll be better at selecting the pills or the foods or the nutritions, because they'll be interested in more than just an endpoint, which is a name of a disease, and then a remedy that doesn't actually result in cure. It's great to extend life. It's great to turn a chronic disease into an acute situation we can help, but it's much better to cure. And we've failed so much at curing in conventional wisdom that we've given it up as an option. It's actually considered to be unethical to promise a cure. And I do think that's correct, because no one knows if they're going to get a cure or not, so we shouldn't promise cures, but we can certainly work for better with a capital B. And obviously the bestest better is cure.
I think it's a great point. And I know a lot of what really gets people interested in new ideas is our actionable steps, things they can see quickly. And I always find those enlightening myself when I go and maybe I listen to a 2.5 hour podcast or something that I'm unfamiliar with. My favorite podcast, somewhere in there will say, hey, listen, here's 2 or 3 things you can do today to start this. And it keeps you engaged after that's over. It allows you to try something new, explore, feel successful. What are maybe 2 or 3 things that, I know that the first, and B is the first thing, it's behavior. We're all behaving. What are some behavioral points that maybe the owners could do quickly and easily that would allow them to start observing better or helping with the energy and the emotions and the feelings and all that stuff for their pet?
Well, I love that question, because it actually brings in more than just behavior, but rather behavior and mood and energy and appetite, because strategies that will help with them all. And there are things like love therapy, just catching your pet's eye and telling them you love them 100 times a day or more if it's Lulu.
Or
The happy dance, putting on your earbuds, play the happiest music that you've got, which will make your brain waves more likely to emit a happy energy. Can just dance around with your pet, and that will get them to eat. That will improve them overall. The therapeutic sniff hook is a big one for a lot of dogs, because as Dr. Beckhoff said, dogs live and experience the world through their nose, and just taking them out 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, whether it's for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour, depends on how much time you have. Just let them explore the world. You're not out there to exercise. You're out there to be happy. Keep your leash. Keep their leash.
Yes.
In a smile. And let them just guide the walk. And that's only a few of the strategies. There are unlimited. Dr. Christine is famous for saying that, there's always something that we can do. And there is almost always something that we can do. I'll give the example of Lil from Holistic Actions. When her dog was at the end of life, we had a conversation, and I realized that the dog just loved being in the car, not going anywhere, but just being in the car. That
Absolutely.
Extended the dog's life by a long time.
I love the moments Like we don't have to think about, well, for instance, when I'm at my clients' homes for an hour on average, but I'm not training their dog for an hour. There's little moments that I engage with their dog or the owners. And I don't think we all think of this somehow. We have this obligation to go for an hour walk, or when training your dog at home, it's going to be an hour. Like when I'm over, it's basically a moment. It's 1 to 2 minutes, maybe 5 at the most. Get on your knees, get on your back, throw some food around, laugh with your pet, take him out for a 5-minute meander, sniff. And really, I think you'll find that little bit that you're able to do is reinforced because it was successful, and you'll do it more. Your pet will love it.
Massive.
Focusing on the positive.
Exactly. Positive and practical.
It's actually one thing that I did in the Healthy Animals Journal when I wrote it 20 years ago. An animal communicator said to me, you know, in homeopathy, you're asking them to give reports back on all the negative symptoms. What you should also do is have them write in the journal in pretty colors all the wonderful things their animals are doing. So the focus is on the positive instead of on the negative. So good point, Brenda.
Beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how amazing their pets are. They call me for problems. I'm like, man, you have a really, really good dog. I mean, this is an amazing animal with very minimal problems, and I'm impressed. You know, it's
what I love about the way that I teach animal communication, because we look for the essence and the favorite things of the animal. And when somebody is looking at the condition or the behavior, they forget all the other wonderful things. And when we come back to the essence and the favorite things, then we can create a new strategy for how the animal actually creates their own strategy for how they get through behavior, how they get through illnesses, health challenges. So it becomes, noticing who they really are at their core versus, and she barks at the door.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say I'm guilty, because when I take Lulu Llama out for a walk, I pull her away when she's sniffing where another dog has gone, done their business, because I don't want her nose getting dirty.
It's very common.
It's a good thing.
It is very, very common, and that is a great example of you can actually build immune resilience by allowing them to do that. Just like we know that kids that grow up, rolling in the dirt and eating dirt and exposed to animals have a lower rate of asthma and allergies when they get older, because their immune resilience is better. And that brings up the whole topic of balance that results in allergies, or the imbalance that results in allergies, but that's another show.
But it's actually called community biology. And this idea that you should live alone is absolutely absurd biologically, because we exchange bacteria. There's evidence that people are actually attracted to other people because they like the bacteria that are in their guts. And when we touch each other, we automatically trade these bacteria in the process of what we're doing. And when we keep dogs from sniffing, when we prevent them from getting in contact with those bacteria, because we've been indoctrinated so much by the bacteria are bad, viruses are bad, which completely denies the fact that the majority of bacteria help us. The majority of viruses are essential for our survival. A good percentage of the viruses that are in a normal dog stool actually kill bad viruses and kill bad bacteria. So, these things are there for, some of them are just camping out, but the majority of them in an established microbiome are actually protecting the dog. And it's not just the bugs, right? We are better when there's 6 of us on the screen. We're happier when somebody's not missing, because we get information. We get the same information from 2 people gets filtered by 2 different minds. The more we have, and in biological medicine, we're actually literally talking about the community that we live with. If we live with a community of people who are depressed, we exchange bacteria with one another that are depressed bacteria. They cause depression. And so a kid who's growing up in a family of depressed people becomes depressed. Is it genetic, or is it because he's only been exposed to that microbiome? We know that people who step out of that, in addiction and other kinds of things, they find another group of bacteria. They find another group of viewpoints. They find another, set of community, of environment, of possibility. The biological criteria for health is richness and diversity. It's not purity. It's not purity and single-mindedness. That's not healthy.
And it's also, we have to remember, it is individual, even though studies are showing that, Dr. Rick, there are kids who grow up in a depressed family who are great, and they do fine. They have a resilience that interacts with those bacteria.
Absolutely.
So it's not like it's going to happen. I just want to emphasize that. Same with dogs. Jeff,
but the point is, the point about it isn't that all depression isn't genetic, all depression isn't environmental, but the environment plays a massive part in that, as does the food and all those other things. And if you're doing BEAM, you're going to notice when things are better or worse. And then if you notice when they're worse, you can do something. But also if you notice when they're better, you can go, hey, that's a good thing. When I take him for a sniff every day, he does better at the end of the week than he was doing when I just had him in the apartment all day and I raced him out quick to get a pee before I go to work. You
were jumping up in your seat there, Dr. Jeff.
Oh, I just want to kind of bring it back to Kat's question about sniffing, dog pee or, areas in the city. You're in the city, Kat, right?
Kind of.
There are two factors. There's the individuality that Dr. Christina talked about, and I want to just quickly plug the exposome. Because the exposome is the molecular biology. This is now hard science, maybe the hardest biological science. The way physics is among the hardest, science in general. Molecular biology and the exposome is defining what I call molecular individuality. So how the individual responds to the environment. And that is the definition of susceptibility. How susceptible are they to get sick? But there's another factor, and that is the dose. So even though two dogs go into a kennel, and one gets kennel, and they both get exposed to kennel cough, one gets kennel cough and one doesn't, one is more susceptible than the other. But if the dose of the Bordetella is high enough, then it's going to overwhelm the individual susceptibility. So maybe Kat, just let Lulu go where she wants, sniff, and just limit it a little bit.
And one quick thing to add, I think it's pretty fascinating regarding olfactory senses. And if maybe Kat, this might make some sense. If you knew how many times you smell other people and didn't know it subconsciously, there's some evidence, a lot of evidence, that we actually smell our hands in passing every time we shake someone else's hand without knowing it. 80% roughly is the number I heard, which is pretty good science in the scientific world. When you shake someone else's hand, at some point you've wafted it, or in passing, I'm not paying attention to it myself, but this is something that's already been tested. And so I find it really interesting how good we are as smellers. We can actually smell scents, in some cases as good as dogs in lab trials, under the ground, buried scents. We don't give ourselves enough credit, and I think we should do the same to our dogs.
Well, because we're all in our heads.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of other senses competing. Theirs are,
Yeah. I wanted to see what do you bring the environment into the beam, right? Like one thing, and I would love to hear, I always think about why fireworks are so much worse for dogs that are prone to freak out about fireworks than say thunderstorms, because at least thunderstorms, the barometric pressure has changed throughout the day and they have some warning in their system, whereas fireworks are just like bam, 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 and they have it just comes out of the blue. And so it does, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, that's a great question, and brings us back to susceptibility, because I, for 37 years, have actually found more dogs and cats affected by thunder than fireworks, but it depends on the individual. Some individuals don't respond, and that's part of the beam. And when we're treating an animal that is reacting to fireworks, and that reactivity, which is abnormal in some cases, a loud explosion right outside the house is going to startle all of us. But what is the reaction? Are they startled and then they're fine? Or they're startled and they're shaking and go off and hide and they don't want to see it for an hour? So yeah, and that brings us to 4P medicine, which is again a conventional framework in medical science of all of the systems in the body, and that includes smell, the environment, how you respond. Brings it back to 4 more P's: personalized medicine, that's proactive, predictive, and participatory. So very, very, very important that you be part of the process, and that, as a pet parent, you get better educated and empowered in the care of your animals.
So it looks like you know your P's, and that leads us to the Q, which is quality of life. And so I think it's a really interesting, simple tool that no one has to spend thousands of dollars for, or attend years of training or get a degree from a university. It's just sort of common sense applied in a more specific and accurate way. I really thank you for bringing that information to our viewers. It's great, Jeff. Thanks.
You are so welcome, Rick. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna use P's and Q's. Mind your P's and Q's. That's a great
It's absolutely yours.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely yours.
Yep.
Well, we're going to have to close the show out. And I wanted to bring Lulu Llama in. And you're going to be able to sniff all you want. Okay? I'll just disinfect her nose after.
No. No.
I kissed his face. Anyway, this has been such a great show, Dr. Jeff. How can people get in touch with you?
The very best way is go to holisticactions.com. That's HOLISTIC actions, ACTIONS.com.
Wonderful. This has been such an informative show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have one last little word that I want to say. Of all the special things we choose to do for our planet, let one of them be of service to animals.
Oh,
thank you so much for joining us on All Paws Pet Talk TV. Till next time.
Medical information obtained from our website or the live show is not intended to be a substitute for professional care. If your pet has, or you suspect they might have, an illness or other medical condition, you should consult a healthcare provider. The opinions expressed on this TV program are not necessarily those of All Paws Pet Talk TV, this TV show, or their sponsor. For all questions or info on sponsorship, email us at info@allpawspettalk.tv or visit our website at allpawspettalk.tv.
Flea problems don't always start on your pets or inside your home. Often they begin in your yard. That's where flea eggs hatch and larvae grow to become adult fleas that bite. You can prevent fleas from coming back by killing them in the soil where they breed with Flea Destroyer, the all-natural, chemical-free way to break the flea life cycle. It's safe for your family, your pets, your plants, and our environment. Flea Destroyer contains microorganisms that live in soil and attack flea larvae. One application can stop new generations of fleas for up to 1 year. Your other flea control measures will be more effective if you stop fleas at the source. Ask your veterinarian for Flea Destroyer.